Welcome to the Brazil Nuts or Amazonia Nuts and Pine Nut Roundtable. I welcome you all to London, my hometown, and born here and lived here all my life, so it's a pleasure to have the INC here. I'd like to start by introducing my panel. I'll start with myself. I'm Edward Dannon. I'm a director at Voicefell, and we import nuts, dried fruit, seeds, and coffee from around the world. And we have a few processing facilities, including one in Bolivia doing Brazil nuts. Daniel Suarez is here representing Rodrigo Coca. Daniel's a sales manager at Amazonas Manutata, and Rodrigo's the general manager. We have Munish Manocha from Curry Nuts in Fresno, California. They produce nuts, snacks, nut butters, and pack private label and national brands. Mehmet Çıkmaz is from Karaman in Turkey. They are exporters of pine nuts and other nuts from Turkey and also in Dubai. And Charles Mao is a senior business development manager at Sunshine Tianjin. He's worked there for 7 years, but Sunshine have been producing pine nuts and other seeds for more than 30 years. And he's now a resident of East London, I learnt last night, which is interesting. So before I start, actually, I'm just going to give, why pine nuts and why Brazil nuts together, you may ask, as I did. And the main reason is that they're actually more similar than you think. I've been on some trips with Pino where we've been talking about them together. They are both forest nuts. They're harvested in the wild. They're not cultivated crops in the main. They take a long time to grow. Pine nuts can be for upwards of 15 years. Brazil nuts can be 25 to 30 years before they start to have a proper fruit, something you could harvest. They both face big challenges from the parts of the world which they grow. Anyone in the industry knows how difficult, especially in pine nuts, with the many different regions, geopolitical problems as well. They have a huge positive effect on the environment, huge, which is something we'll talk about, something which was mentioned earlier. And what's cool about them is that they're just organic. You don't need to work too hard. They just grow, and they're organic, and they're wildly harvested. One of the key differences between them is that Brazil nuts only grow in the Amazon. They can't be grown elsewhere for a few key reasons. And the other thing that they have in common is that they only get 30 minutes at the INC, so I better stop talking and carry on. Next slide. So this is the program. I'm going to show you first an amazing video produced by Amazonas Manutata. Last year we showed one about the whole collection process. This one is going to shock you and is going to excite you at the same time. And then I'm going to talk about the crop forecast very quickly, and then I promise to stop talking and we get straight to the round table. So I will kick off with a video, or which you will.
We all know it. The future of our civilization is in danger. The lack of care and respect for our planet are at the root of the problem. Many believe that nothing bad is going on. There's nothing to worry about. All we have to do is look up to the sky for someone to save us. Perhaps looking up may be the solution, or at least one of them. And a tree can sometimes save an entire forest, especially if it is an Amazon nut tree. This wild tree, Bertholletia excelsa, is scattered in the Amazon region of Peru, Bolivia, and Brazil in more than 32.5 million hectares of primary forest. For more than 10,000 years, the Amazon has played a leading role for our planet, both supplying food and regulating weather patterns. The Amazon nut, also known as the Brazil nut, is a superfood, key to the economic and social development of the entire Amazon region. For that reason, caring for this tree is a priority. Since it is part of the most dominant tree species, it makes the Amazon one of the largest carbon sinks on the planet, which in addition to slowing climate change, contributes to the formation of the Amazon's flying rivers, which produce more than 20 trillion liters of water per day that are released into the atmosphere, vital for agricultural production and the lives of millions of people. Together, we can create new market opportunities to revalue the Amazon nut and position it in a new business paradigm. Because everything that revolves around it is good for the planet and for our future as a species. We still have time, but we must act now. It is time to look up to our mighty Amazon and to this faithful protector, the Amazon nut.
Hope you enjoyed the video. I think Dr. Rachel Garrett, who did the sustainability seminar, certainly would recognize the importance of what we showed, and she was highlighting it in her talk as well. So now, just to talk about the crop forecast. It's a difficult one as always, but this is what we're forecasting on a kernel basis. If we just look at the bottom part, it's much easier. To reiterate, these are based on export figures, and it will be what's exported from each country. We aren't quantifying from Brazil what they consume in their local market. So if you look to the right side, this is the forecast for the crop, which has started to be harvested pretty much at the end of last year, but the exports only start from March forwards, approximately. So overall, the anticipation across Bolivia will there be a reduced supply, which is something which we can discuss. From Peru, also a reduction in supply in terms of exports. And in Brazil, interesting because of the way they've been exporting much more this season due to local markets, lots of reasons, we expect a slight increase, maybe around the same as last year, but a slight increase. And if I ever have honors of doing previous ones, I always like to check what we said last time during the round table to make sure that we weren't far off. So this graph is showing the crop year. So it shows exports from March through to February. And what we were estimating from the last year was that the crop was going to increase following a shorter crop the year before, and it did. And we expected there would be a significant increase in Bolivia's share of the market, which it did, and Brazil and Peru stayed relatively the same. So I don't want to talk anymore. Apart from one thing. So I thought when you do the roundtable discussion, sometimes you have a boring picture up on the screen, and I thought I'd put a more interesting one. So the way I did this, I went to an artificial intelligence called Midjourney, and I said, draw a picture of it, or the exact words were, show me a drone shot of the Amazon rainforest at sunset, and it produced this unbelievable picture for me. And what I found really interesting was pretty much very close to the center is a beautiful Brazil nut tree. And I thought it was a pretty picture to put up. But then I started to think a bit later, I wonder in 10 years, if I asked it to do the same, would we still have a beautiful rainforest, or would we have to ask what did the Amazon rainforest used to look like? Which is a fear which I have, but we can go into more details. So, to start. This is also interesting because the INC gave a layout of how we should do the round table, the topics which we should discuss. And they normally say, let's start with supply, then let's start with demand, and then we look at the future. So we discussed it, and we had the suppliers saying, we don't want to start with supply. What affects supply is demand. And the customers say, we don't want to start with demand, we want to start with supply, because what affects. And to be honest, what's the most important for everyone here is our suppliers. So we're going to start with demand, which the suppliers asked us to do. We must listen to them. So, to start on the demand side, Manish, I'd like to ask you, have you seen demand in the last year, and how do you feel you've been affected?
Yeah, thanks, Edward. Since last year, because of the issues with the supply chain, especially the last year, 2022, quarter 2, quarter 3, the demand has been stable to negative. I don't see much impact this year yet in terms of trying to improve the demand because of the last year hangover, and also it's just overall the inflationary impact. People are trying to move away from discretionary purchases to the basics. So overall, it's been as part of other nuts, whatever we see in the other nut trends, it's been the same.
Yes, so I think so overall you see demand has been affected by the same thing as all other nuts, inflationary pressures, price rises, but on top of that, Brazil nuts faced actually similar to other nuts, supply chain issues in the previous season with shipment delays and then overshipment and oversupply. So I think in talking in the past, you said something great, which is that you can't eat your dinner twice.
Yeah.
So we faced a period where everyone was hungry early on in the year, but there was nothing delivered.
Yeah.
And then what was done? How can you move forward from that position now?
So we have been trying to deprecate, like you reminded me, all the nuts of Q2 or Q3 or Q1, Q2 started arriving in our warehouses Q3 and Q4, but like you reminded, you can't have your dinner twice. So they're not going to buy more nuts just because they didn't buy in the last quarter. We have been trying to deprecate that demand, and now we are trying to see how we can bring on the recent low prices, actually pass it on to our customers. Retailers have been pretty hesitant in actually passing on the overall nut prices down to their consumers. They've been either hesitant because they think it might go up, or they're just trying to pocket the margins, healthy margins for themselves and not pass it on to the consumers.
Yeah, I think it's been a topic discussed a few times, how our prices of commodities can go down, but the pricing on the shelves can go up, even in some cases. And I know that in the UK, there's a lot of lobbying to government to say that we want the retailers to start to lower prices. Okay, so we can come back to demand, but let's move back to supply as well. So something interesting about the previous graph I showed with the crops by country was they're pretty stable. Peru exports have been around 5,500 tons. So Daniel, what do you see the future for Peruvian exports?
Hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. Hope you're doing great. Thanks for the question, Edward. First, we have to understand that we are not a commodity. We are a wild superfood that provides value to the Amazon rainforest. As you show on the slides, actually the volume in the last 10 years have remained stable, and it has a reason. Because communities in the Amazon rainforest, in the economic viewpoint, is a regional necessity of subsistence to keep good volumes every year. So, after the fall of market and Goma and Chiringa at the beginning of the 20th century, the Amazon industry has become one of the main economic pillars for local and native communities in Bolivia, Peru, and Brazil, and an Amazon protector too. Let me give you some numbers. In Bolivia, for instance, we're talking about that 75% of the northern region, they depend direct and indirect from this industry. Peru, we're talking about 20%. So, in the low international prices, we really understand your headaches. It's totally crazy when we understand the prices. The low international prices generate many risks, and one of them could lead to replacement of this treasure of the Amazon by another commodities. So, and leading the risk as well of 30.5 million hectares of rainforest, the lungs of the world. We have information that in Bolivia, for instance, there's a high pressure now to move forward to another economic business model. Why? Because it's not profitable an industry. So we talk about the problem now. Thank you.
Very interesting. Yeah, so you're touching on a little bit of what I think the picture of the rainforest might be in the future if things don't change. Yeah. So from my perspective, also on a recent trip to Bolivia, because of problems with, normal problems of rain, floods, planes cancellations, we had to drive through Acre and Rondônia in Brazil, and it was stark to see the picture of the land all cleared, a few cattle, and very lonely-looking Brazil nut trees. And in other meetings, I asked people, what's your fear for Brazil nuts in the next 10 years? And one of the, that wasn't me shushing, you can talk, I don't mind. And one of the fears is that there just won't be Brazil nuts. And the impact of that is what Daniel has said. It's the communities in the forest, it's the lungs of the earth. So it's a super important nut, which is why the video started a bit scary, but it had a positive message at the end. So then, let's cut back to demand then. So, as a supplier, demand, help me fix this. So, for for the last few years, there's been this increased cost of living, but we felt like things have been rebuilding. Demand has been coming back. What's your experience been in the US market, and what about the market for organic products in the US?
I think there is a real opportunity to improve the demand for Brazil nuts, especially on the organic side. There is need to improve the awareness, and we have to evangelize. Like I heard, almonds or pistachio boards have really done an excellent job in promoting those health benefits of those nuts. We need to do the same for Brazil nuts. They are really not just good for the environment or the social impact we talked about or we heard from the sustainability session. If we were able to explain to the consumers how, when they buy Brazil nuts, it's not only good for them, with all the health benefits of these Brazil nuts, there is a genuine improvement in the environment and the Amazon forest, and as like you said, lungs of the world. It really adds a lot to them in terms of just not their physical, but also emotional and other economic well-being of the society. So I just think we need to improve that awareness. The other part from a now manufacturer perspective, I would like to see a sustainable, but also predictable and reliable supply chain of Brazil nuts. Right now, it's difficult to buy for 12 months out, where we can say with confidence, this is the price, and this is how the shipments are going to come in, so I can go and develop this category on a single SKU basis, rather than a mixed nut, where I'm putting this among other 4 or 5 other nuts. That has been difficult because we are hesitant given the volatility of the pricing or the supply chain issues in the past. So that to me is really the need from a manufacturing perspective if I want to develop the demand for Brazil nuts. Having said that, this year, we are hoping now with this historic low prices, we should be able to do, if not a consistent SKU set, but at least a limited time offering to see if we can bump up the demand, as long as we are all wary about what is going to happen next year, what the crop is going to be next year, and is the price going to go back up to $5 or $6?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess it's a message out to the supply also that whilst we can see the low prices now, we have to focus on the future too. So we're at a point of development now. Yes, the prices haven't hit the shelves yet, but we expect them to. We believe that demand is starting to come back, but let's not ruin it. Let's get demand back. Let's get stability back into the market, because we will be at a pivotal moment in another 3-4 months when the new crop starts to be spoken about, and to have some stability from the supply to help us increase demand. And then when you increase demand, we can decommoditize Brazil nuts, we can promote it, and it can grow into the product it really needs to be. And on terms of organic, have you seen any big developments in the organic market in the US?
Yeah, we have actually 2, Caronut personally, specifically, we are developing 2 SKUs for our customers, which are organic Brazil nuts. As I said, it just needs more evangelization. We need to evangelize the benefits of Brazil nuts. Most of the consumers don't understand that they are naturally grown, they are not, and they're just harvested. So all the Brazil nuts are organic. It's just how they're processed, whether they get a certification of organic or conventional. That needs to be really educated. Just the communication has to be a bit better. Okay. We need to improve the awareness.
Okay. Now I'm going to own up again that I used another type of artificial intelligence to come up with some questions for this roundtable. And some were rubbish, but one was particularly good, so I included it. And the question is going to be both to the supply and both to the demand, is how can the Brazil nut industry balance the need for sustainable sourcing with the need for economic viability and profitability? Which blew me away. It's like it understands that it's a super important product, but it also understands it's volatile. So I'll start with you, Daniel. How can you balance the need to be sustainable? And then if you want to add on to it, which is something we've discussed, what are the best practices which can be used to be for sustainable sourcing?
Good. So we talk about problems, so right now let's talk about solution. the correct global marketing position and the revalorization of the Amazon rainforest is one of the solutions that we as the supply, we want to show here in this Congress. And regarding the sustainable practice, Edward, Mr. Munish also talked about organic certifications, social certifications too, as fair trade, for instance. We're talking about carbon footprint now, water footprint as well, associativity, the partnership, but we have to understand this as long as the market revalorizes this new proposal, all this practice will be scalable. So let me share with you more information about some more sustainable practice in our industry. For instance, in Peru, we are talking about that 60% of concessionaires, the forest producers, they are receiving complementary incomes as carbon credits. We are talking about as well of carbon footprint and water footprint private initiatives. In Manutata, for instance, in Peru, we are the first in the industry, but just aside from paper, we really want to encourage the whole industry that we need to take in the serious way about climate change, because there's no way of return of our civilization. As Mr. Munish said as well, we need to educate the final consumers. So that's why we are creating a traceability system to show the final consumers, to educate them what's really going on behind Amazon nuts. Because it's more than a delicious and nutritious nut. There's a high impact in, as I mentioned before, 32.5 million hectares of rainforest. In Brazil, we're talking about Oca, for instance, mapping of all actors in neutral carbon footprint for the long term of the industry. In Bolivia as well, but Edward, you've been in Bolivia and you know how difficult it is receiving the support from the government. That's great.
Yeah, so and to Munish as well. Yeah, how do you balance that? Because you have customers asking for the most aggressive price, but then you also have customers asking for sustainable sourcing, for audits. And how do you balance that with your customers in the US? Is it something which they are requesting from you?
Yeah, we have just Caronut on its own. We have a 15-step supplier onboarding. So we don't buy from anyone unless we have vetted them out with our own process. Those 15 steps include all kinds of verification of any of the practices which I heard in the last session, which the German government is coming out, which we were discussing earlier. So we are trying to protect our supply chain, and that's our contribution to the industry in terms of trying to do the right thing, whether it's mandated or not. That's one. Our customers also are demanding for it. From a consumer perspective in US, sustainability is preferred, but not demanded as yet, because I don't think you can charge a premium so easily on top of whatever the price might be, retail price. So it's going to become sooner or later, maybe in Europe first, it's going to become table stakes. So it's going to become the cost of doing the business. So it's not going to become a premium addition or a benefit, additional benefit. It's going to become, if you want to do business, you have to be sustainable in multiple ways we have been discussing. So that's our view.
Yeah, 'cause it was mentioned earlier, and I won't attempt to say the German name of the legislation, because it was hard enough for the German guy to say it, but a new due diligence, which is a requirement from larger companies of a certain turnover or a certain number of people, to look into their supply chain. It's been in the UK for a while. There was the Modern Day Slavery Act, which was like one of the first steps where companies started to check all of their supply chain. But this new due diligence approach, which is, again, forcing companies or pushing companies into being more critical of their supply chain and actually checking. And I think that's really positive, because it pushes back requirements, yes, onto supply to do SMETA audits, SEDEX audits, but in the same way that quality has improved. This was sort of the steps which have been taken: quality first, and then and then that spread in the industry. It started with a few, but now everyone has increased quality. And then the next step is in sustainability and in a safe supply chain. So One other key thing you mentioned, just to pick up on, is the transparency back to the supply. And I think that's key, because when we are pushing, let's say, for a premium to ensure a key supply chain, they want to know where that's going. Because it can't be going into all the actors along the way. They want to, or it can, to a percentage, let's say, for the effort done to do it, but it also needs to make sure that it is helping the communities in the jungle. And people who've been to Bolivia this year, when seeing the lower prices and lower income all the way down the chain, have seen the real impact that has back to the collectors in the forest. Yes, these countries are politically particularly unstable, and Daniel helped me walk across a blockade in Puerto Maldonado with fires on either side. So yeah, it's a challenging place to be at the best of times, but they need big support despite the political challenges there. Yeah, so we've covered that. So if anyone wants to answer any questions, if you don't give me any, I'll just pretend you did and make one up. But if you do, then I will read it out. And then let's talk about established markets and opportunities for growth. Let's end on a high, maybe. Where do you see the opportunities, Munish? I mean, you've mentioned a few, but what's the...
Yeah, I think the biggest opportunity is to educate the market on the benefits. I'll summarize in 3 points in terms of, we need to, of course, educate the market a bit more. I believe the benefits of Brazil nuts are known to select few. It's still not really prevalent. Not everyone knows what they are. They get confused. They're really superfood. So if we can educate the market on the benefits, what's in it for them, and also about how they're one of the best or most sustainable or environment-friendly nuts available to them. So if that is what we saw earlier in the sustainability session, so they are doing their part by consuming the nuts which are really harvested, not grown. They are not taking away any resources. Actually, they are adding back to the environment. That would be really good. That's a great opportunity if we can explain to them what's in it for them. Then the last and also critical as a manufacturer is creating a sustainable but also predictable and consistent supply chain. So we can build this category up, and we can actually develop a program where we can comfortably say, we're going to price this out, and we're going to create or introduce these SKUs, organic, salted, or whatever different seasons. We can try to come up with different variations, as long as we know it's a predictable and consistent supply chain, and I can build out a program for the next 12 to 18 months without worrying the prices are going to go up 2x or 3x, or the supply won't be there.
Okay.
These are the 3 key points. If I think about it, they're all possible. We just need to work together.
Anything to add, Daniel?
Yeah, as Mr. Munish said, it's really important to work together. And I think in my next question, I will discuss more about, we talk about the problem, I know the solution, but what we need to do. What's the real action that we can take now as industry, supply and demand?
Okay, great. And okay, so one question from the audience, you can decide whether I'm making it up or not, is how about China? China's not been a big market for Brazil nuts in the past. They've been an importer in volume from Brazil of in-shell nuts, which is obviously consumes much more in China in shell. But what about kernel? How are you seeing, Daniel, demand from China?
Well, China for sure will be a strong player in the short term, but aside from that, we need to understand this as long as traditional markets support and contribute to the new global position of Amazon, and because we really understand the problems that the demand has. So we won't have a market bubble as it was Korea in 2010. Do you remember about that, Edward?
Yeah.
So that's why we need to differentiate the offer. Because China can buy everything, because we're talking about a limited production of Amazon nut.
Yeah.
So, for sure. And
so basically China's exciting, but dangerous.
It's dangerous at the same
time. Okay, okay. Yeah, because I mean, Chinese barriers to entry were lower, and there was no registration requirements. You just had to be from a certain origin to ship there. Now the barriers to entry are a bit high. You need registration. But over the last 2 years, more companies are becoming registered. Some have been out in China last week at Cial and at the bakery and ingredient show. So they are attempting to develop, and you can see why. When demand was so slow in Q1 and Q2, the fear in communities and the fear in the sellers is that they don't have a big enough market, even for the small volume which they have. So they looked for alternative markets to sell to.
I would like to add something, Edward.
Please.
It's really important to understand if we only see Brazil in shell, it could be dangerous as well, because, you know, families, just in Brazil, for instance, we're talking about more than 60,000 families. In Bolivia, more than 30,000 families. And in Peru, we're talking about more than 25,000 families. So if we just export Brazilian shell,
yes,
it will be complicated for sure.
I mean, that's in some other commodities, they ban the export of in-shell to keep local jobs. And actually, in the Brazil nut industry, some factories make the active decision to not use mechanical cracking, to keep it more manual labor, to keep more people employed. So employment is also...
Definitely.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you very much. That was, for me, the more easy part of the roundtable. Now we will move on to the pine nuts roundtable. But we can have a round of applause for the Brazil nut panel, so thank you very much. So, pine nuts. Okay, now we're going to... I thought that Brazil nuts was a dark art when coming up with pine nut production, and then I got involved in pine nuts and realized we really aren't very sure. So everyone does their best and then tries to fix it after. But this is the in-shell basis in metric tons for exports of pine nuts. So I will skip across into the kernel, and we can just quickly go over whether something is up or down is the expectation. So since 2019, 2020, in a bumper crop, the market's been waiting for a smaller crop, and they thought it could have been last year, they thought maybe it's this year. So at the moment, the crop sizes, as indicated by, or the exports, as indicated by all of the origins, are slightly down on last year. So China slightly down, Russia more significantly down, North Korea down. So basically an overall feeling that there will be less pine nuts available to the market for this season. And again, if everyone's taken their photo, because I know I always see people snap these. But I think they're going to be available at the end of the day. This is another AI picture. Not quite as cool as the Brazil nut one, but I asked it to do a pine nut forest in China, and it came up with this. I do find AI brilliant. I wonder what it will do in the future. We might not need to be up here. We can just ask AI to do it. All right, so again, I will stop talking and move over to the round table, but it can change. Thank you for being here, Charles. As I mentioned in the introduction, when I was looking at the crop numbers, the market for the last few years has been expecting the cyclical smaller crop. What was last year like, even though you did expect the smaller crop there? How was the carryover, and what do you expect for the next season?
And actually, for the pine nuts in the Far East Asia, which includes mainly includes three countries: Mongolia, China, and also Russia. And we have actually mainly 4 different commercial type of pine nuts. The bigger size, which is also called red pine, and also known as Koreansis. This is mainly grown in northeast part of China, as well as Russia. So this year, we expect the new crop will have a smaller crop comparing to the previous year, last year. And for the Siberica, which is also somebody called it cedar pine. This is a little bit smaller than the red pine, but more sweeter in taste. For such kind of variety, the main origin is in Mongolia and Russia. And we believe for the new crop, for Mongolia, we'll have a smaller crop. But for Russia, we believe they will have a medium to smaller crop. And we believe for the other 2 varieties, which are only specialized in China, the one which is called Pumila will have a medium crop. And the last one, which is the very smaller size, Pumila actually is the smallest. And Yunnan will have, which is the size is smaller, similar to the cedar pine, will have a medium crop as well in the next year. So generally speaking, we believe for the next year's new crop, most of the region for the pine nuts in the Far East, Northeast Asia will have a smaller crop. And some of the smaller variety, like the China-only variety, Pumila and Yunnan, will have a medium. That's what I got for the next year's expectation.
Okay, and I know that pine nuts can keep for a number of years in shell before.
Yeah.
So how's the carryover been from previous seasons? And do you think that it's significant enough to assist with the smaller predictions you've just given?
Yeah, I believe for next year, last year, the free carryover is quite stable. Just because one of the most important factor for the pine nuts is the red pine, because it's almost daily consumed in China is the red pine whole seed, roasted, with the top opened, which we call the open top red pine in China. And this kind of variety is consumed in the festival season, especially in the biggest season in the Mid-Autumn Festival, which is in the autumn season, roughly around October. And the most important, another one, as everybody knows, is Chinese New Year. We have huge consumption. And as far as you know, last year China opened and dropped down all the policy for the zero tolerance for the COVID. And these will have a very good promotion for the sales of the red pine in China. So the carryover for the red pine last year will be a little bit smaller comparing to the previous year.
Okay.
But for the other, it will be very stable. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And Mehmet, what about for the Middle Eastern and Mediterranean crops? And I'm always amazed that they sell, because the pricing are we think pine nuts are expensive, and then you buy them from the Mediterranean.
Exactly. The situation of the pine nut, Mediterranean and Middle Eastern pine nut is also similar of the Mediterranean pine nut, since it's grown on the Mediterranean coast. It's all based on the factor of the price movement. But since if you are talking about the crop size, we have been unfortunate over the last couple of years with the insect damage in the pine cones, This started from Portugal, it moved on to Spain, Italy, and then to Turkey. But nowadays, I mean, if we look at these figures, we see that all the Mediterranean countries have already doubled their crop size with the new crop coming. And especially if we are talking about Turkey, that is up by 45%. But we see right now, especially nowadays, we can see the kernel maturation inside the pine cones. And nowadays we see that it is more mature, and we can say even though it would be, the crop size might be a little bit more than 45% comparing to last year. And if we talk about the Middle Eastern is basically Lebanese one. Lebanese one is the advantage of Lebanese pine kernel is larger in size. If you're talking about the largeness, because it's one characteristic of the pine nut as well. Largeness is in size, and it's more preferable within the ethnic groups living in, let's say, in America or in some other parts of the world. But in general, we will be cherishing, I think, with large crop sizes with the from the Mediterranean countries.
Okay. Interesting. And how do you see demand for pine nuts has been evolving over time? I mean, you're talking about crop sizes of the larger varieties increasing. Is that what you're seeing in the future? More demand for those type of pine nuts?
Frankly speaking, the demand for the Mediterranean pine nut vanished over the last years because of the price difference. I mean, an unstable situation, a huge price difference comparing to some other origins, some alternative products. We shall be talking about this later on as well, if you like. And because of that, our market share was lowered at a very minimal level right now because of the price. So our main objective right now is just to grab this or market share back from the alternative or other origin pine nuts.
Okay. And one thing I found interesting in the walnuts roundtable was when the lower the price goes, the better the quality needs to be. And when the higher the price is, the less the quality needs to be, because everyone just wants the product. So what have been the challenges in pine nuts with quality improvements during huge volatile prices? Has there been changes in the production methods or processing? And how are you addressing challenges with processing of pine nuts? To Charles.
Okay. Actually, the pine nuts, as everybody knows, is grown in the wild forest. So the major challenge is from the natural disaster, because it's not controlled by the human, and it's very hard to expect. And for example, the pine nuts is very easy to get, like the Mediterranean variety, also damaged by the insect and worm, and also the shrinking kernels caused by the deficiency of the nutrition. So as one of the major exporter in China, we at Sunshine just trying to improve our technology rather than the traditional one, because traditional way of processing for the pine nuts is quite challenging to get rid of the pine nuts defects like the shrinking kernels and also the worm insect damage the kernels. So we believe in the producers in China. We are developing the more high advanced sorting technologies to get rid of these defects, as well as these in the process of the pine nut production. It is unavoidable for the human and animal to touch or get in touch to the product. So the microbiological level might be another issue for the product. And as far as we know, we have a branch in the USA as well. We heard about the news for the FDA to recall the salmonella found from the pine nuts. So this is also a reason why we developed a new technology, which is from the Napasol steam pasteurizer, to have the steam pasteurize the pine nuts to ensure the safety. And another one is about issue is about the species of the pine nuts, because as everybody maybe knows about the pine mouse effect, this is caused by a variety called Armandi, which is a very smaller variety, but it's very similar to the size of the pumila. So what we do is to send it to test for the DNA to ensure the species is the one which has no issue about the pine mouse effect.
Okay. Very interesting. It was interesting you spoke quite a lot about on the factory side of things and process and food business, because that's the way my question was directed. But let's go a step back into the forest. And just to ask some questions on, so there's a few sides of things. The first side, let's talk about the protecting biodiversity in the forest. Because I know that there's some interesting rules in Mongolia, there's certain seasons where the border gets shut and to protect the biodiversity. So that's one question on that side. And then the other side is about the people who enter the forest. How do you ensure fair labor processes, that they are paid well, and the traceability for the people who enter the forest, as well as the biodiversity of the forest is maintained?
Oh, yeah. Actually, for the Far East countries producing these varieties of the pine nuts, for Mongolia, they use the government's data to ensure they can picking and exploitation for the pine nuts in the reasonable range to ensure the safety. And they will have issued a picking license for the people who is going to do the picking jobs in the Mongolia. And for Russia, actually, as far as I know, the picking right is determined by the auction. And also, it's organized, also regulated by the third-party professional organizations to ensure the reasonable and the sustainable development of the forest. And whereas in China, we have endangered species management agency, and they cooperating with the China Customs and as well as the China Forest and Grass Bureau to maintain and ensure the species which is endangered can be protected and to ensure the sustainability development of the forest.
Okay.
And also for the labor, just now you mentioned. And we believe in the previous years, the pine nut processing, especially in the preliminary stage, the factories are not modernized and not industrialized. So the human rights, or sometimes here human labor's rights, is not able to be guaranteed because they are, the picking of these pine nuts is in the harsh environment. It's in the forest. And the tree, as you see in the picture, it's a very nice picture. And yeah, it would be like 20 to even 50 meters high. So traditional way of the majority of the way we pick the pine cone is from climbing up the tree. And that would be very dangerous for people to pick it. But nowadays, in the industry of the pine nuts, we developed some other new ways, just like we do the hitting the tree by shaking the tree to get the pine cone, or picking the pine cones under the tree. And as well as there's another new way to pick the pine cones by the hydrogen balloon. In China, we use the hydrogen balloon with two people handling the two ropes connecting with the hydrogen balloon, and one man is sitting in the basket to collect the pine cone. And that will be more efficient and more safe for this picking process.
Wow, I wonder if AI could do that, a hydrogen balloon, two ropes up
It
to the
sounds
top of the tree.
very romantic and very interesting, yes.
Yeah, very innovative.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Mehmet, you've been quiet for too long, so I'll ask you a question. In terms of emerging markets, you spoke a bit about how it's more of the opposite, but are there any emerging markets? Is there any hope for pine nuts?
At this moment, we don't have any emerging markets, but as I mentioned earlier, just our priority right now, top priority, is to get back the markets that we already dominated in the past, let's say like about
regain.
7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. And we can see this, I mean, at this moment, if there is any inquiry about the pine nut, we see extremely very small quantities. But in the past, I remember like container loads were being shipped. But at this moment, we are talking about like small lots. But since we were discussing this, the crop is gonna get bigger and bigger and bigger from now on. Because last year I was mentioning in the roundtable, pine nut roundtable as well, we emphasized the importance of new plantations from new grafted and shorter trees. Charles, you showed this tree, I mean, I think
Yeah,
40,
yeah,
50 meters, it's impossible to collect the pine cones from them. But we have the new grafted trees right now being planted everywhere in Turkey. We are talking about like Black Sea, Aegean area, like South Turkey. And we are seeing right now the results, very good results, that these trees bear more cones than the usual ones. Since they are shorter, the ones, it's too easy to collect the pine cones from there. And since we start growing with bigger crops, we will try to get back the market shares. And another good part about Turkey right now is the municipalities and the state, especially right now, emphasized on the forestation. And when they do this, they go ahead with this type of trees, pine trees, because there is some certain significant income that they are getting with the auction selling of these pine cones. So we will be having some better results in the coming years.
Okay. So in the past, we've been, people have said that we don't ask the hard questions when you're up on the, no one talks about aflatoxin, no one talks about bromide, so I will not do that, and I will ask the tough questions. So how are border control policies and geopolitical risks impacting the pine nut market, particularly in relation to Russia and China border and other border crossings? How does that affect things, and what can be done?
Yeah, it's a quite sensitive question to us, but I believe this is also crucial to the commercial business here for our pine nut industry. As everybody knows, during the COVID period from 2020 to 2022, around almost 3 years, in China, we have the zero tolerance to the COVID, which is a little bit different than the Western way of dealing with the COVID. And during this time, China just having the very strict border control policies for the import product, not only food, but especially for the frozen food. And then they expand these kind of restriction to the room temperature food, which is affected the pine nut industry as well. Because you know, China actually is nowadays the center, almost the center, one of the major center for the pine nut processing and exporting center. So we need to import a lot of products from overseas. But that really has some bad effect during the COVID. But now, because I believe such kind of force majeure, I believe it's a very small possibility event. It's not going to happen again in the future. We believe it will be fine. Yeah.
Okay. Nice answer, Ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think just to tie back a bit to the Brazil nut roundtable, the thing which is affecting pine nuts' ability to grow consumption is its volatility in price. And this is because of the crop, well, one reason other than the border control problems and the changing supply is the famine to feast of the pine nut cycle with the boom crop and then a few years of regular crops and a tiny crop and then a boom crop. So what can be done to mitigate those challenges which are associated with this natural crop cycle? How, as a producer, can you help alleviate that pressure and that movement in supply?
And I believe such kind of thing is very complex to answer. To my point of view, the major reason, major way to, most important factor to mitigate such kind of problem is the capital for the pine nut. You know, the pine nut is a very expensive product, and also the market information, and also these regulations about cross-border policies. So we believe for the producers or for the pine nuts in the industry, we used to do it in this way. At the beginning of this harvest of the pine nuts, we store abundant product in the warehouse using a lot of money, which is money-heavy industry actually. So the major producer store the abundant product into the warehouse and sell it continuously. That's the traditional way. And generally in future, after the harvest, the price will going up. But now these days it's not very stable because you know the cost for the money is getting more expensive than before. For example, in Europe, it used to be just at 0, 1, or 2% the maximum for the capital interest. But now it's 5, 6, or even 7 for some European countries. So this is what cause a lot of trouble for these producers. And as well as the storage cost will be very high. So this is another concern. And then the end consumer market is not very uncertain because people nowadays working from home, they don't dine out in the restaurant. So this kind of demand, this will just disappear. So we believe in future, we believe we need to find the best way to get the money and the best way to store it in the warehouse. And we need to have a very clear picture and very precise information of the market to enable you to be competitive in the market.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So you're saying in the past you used to store a lot of nuts of the pine nut kernels to keep you for the season when the crop would be smaller.
Yeah.
But now, and that is a solution to alleviate, or you then benefited from the price rises during those years.
Yeah.
But now the price is falling, so there's no benefit, so therefore you're not holding as much stock, which creates even more volatility because there's less stock for the carryover, which it makes it very challenging. And how's that affecting on the demand side?
Well, that is, I mean, the demand side, okay, there is the demand side, but at the same time, when Charles responded about the Chinese situation now, in Turkey, in Mediterranean areas, Spain, Italy including, the producers would never sell below their cost price. And they could keep their stocks like for a couple of years. It doesn't matter for them, but they will never sell below the cost price. And on the demand side, as you said, the demand is generated with the price movement and fluctuations. I mean, if the price is expensive, always there is some other alternative product to pine nut.
Yeah. What are they substituting with? What are I know between the varieties they are,
Okay.
but there are other products.
Now, there are a couple of industries that the pine nuts are being used, especially with the Mediterranean I'm talking about. Now, with Europe, we are talking about the sweet and the pasta industry for pesto. And if the product is expensive, there are some always alternative products like small cashew varieties or small almond varieties. And if we check the demand for the Middle Eastern side, it is for the topping for the rice. And they have been using the sliced almonds, slivered almonds, those varieties. But in any case, I believe when the prices become right for everyone, if we create that such environment, we will see the demand coming back for the Mediterranean pine nut.
Okay. Now, we've just got enough time for one made-up question from the audience. Are there any new virgin forests which are available to be? You spoke a bit about grafting, which was my other
yes.
made-up question from the audience. But are there any new virgin forests which are able to be exploited, to be collected from any part, and which are already have been started?
Well, we are cherishing right now with the new grafted trees that I have just mentioned right now. And as I said, I mean, we will see the next years, for example, with nature's gift, we can see the next 3 to 4 years of the pine nut crop if the insect doesn't damage. And we see, for example, next year and the year after, we will have some increasing crops, like minimum 30–40%. Since there are some new forests available, we will see some hopefully major hits.
And in the Mongolia-Russian border, I was aware of the Mongolian being able to exploit parts of Russia's forests which are easier for them to reach. Is that the case, and are there more like that?
And I believe there's a number of forests which are growing in the border in between Russia and Mongolia. But as you know, Mongolia is in the south part of Russia. So the sunny slope is always, mostly the mountain, our sunny slope is located inside Mongolia. And so in the autumn and the early winter will be the collecting season for the pine nuts there. So the Mongolian actually is more easier to get access into a deeper part of the forest. So sometimes maybe they just enter the Russia territory by mistake. And also as well, their Mongolian workers, they are more hardworking and they are more young actually for the Far East Russian people there. So it's very possible for the Mongolia to find a new forest in this way, by hardworking men and easy access to the forest.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It was a very informative discussion both on pine nuts and Brazil nuts. So it just leaves me to thank you and thank everyone for listening and for your attendance. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the Congress. Thank you.